The air of the Siberian taiga, at -70 degrees Celsius, is not merely cold. It is a silent, omnipresent predator. It is a poison that burns when inhaled, turning the moisture in the lungs into microcrystals of ice that tear tissue with every breath. The sound of life itself there is the dry crack of the air breaking. This is the frontier where nature is not just indifferent, but actively hostile to human existence. And it is exactly in this white inferno that Yelena Vasilievna, a 73-year-old widow, chose to mount her final and desperate vigil. This is not a cold solved by extra layers. It is the cold that freezes diesel fuel, turns rubber into glass, and makes wood itself groan and crack under the strain of contraction. Surviving here day after day demands monastic discipline and forged iron resilience. But tonight, the cold is not the only enemy. The cold has brought its most voracious ally. The hook of this story is not only the temperature that defies human comprehension, but the sound that shatters the absolute silence of the frozen plain. The howl, not the distant lament of a lone wanderer, but the guttural chorus of a pack moving with malignant intent. The sound vibrates through the ancient wood of Yelena's cabin, an inescapable warning that winter hunger has reached its peak, and they know exactly where to find the last point of warmth and living flesh within hundreds of square kilometers. Yelena Vasilievna is not an adventurer. She is a guardian. Her cabin, built by her late husband Boris more than 30 years ago, is a tiny beacon of resistance against the white vastness of eastern Siberia. They had retreated into this isolation in their youth, seeking a life of absolute freedom, far from the grip of modern society. But freedom in the taiga comes at a terrible price, especially when old age arrives, and the partner who shared the burden lies buried beneath a pile of stones covered in perpetual snow, just meters from the door. The cabin's internal clock, a thermometer hanging between the wood stove and the sleeping area, registered the limit inside, 8 degrees above zero, a hard-earned bubble of warmth. Yet if she placed her hand against the pine wall, the pain would be immediate, a physical reminder that only 4 centimeters of wood separated her from -70, where exposed skin meant amputation in less than 30 seconds. The conflict was threefold: Yelena's advanced age, the tyranny of extreme temperature, and the calculating intelligence of wolves. In recent weeks, the pressure from the pack had increased exponentially. Record cold for the month had scattered their usual prey. They were starving, desperate, and worst of all, organized. Yelena could hear the drag of heavy bodies across the snow, a sound distinct from the wind, more deliberate. It was the sound of a siege. Yelena's survival plan rested on 3 pillars: the furnace, rationed food, mostly dried fish and old canned goods left by Boris, and the arsenal. But Pillar 1 was failing. Her stockpile of thick firewood, the only thing that truly kept the temperature stable, was dangerously low. She had been forced to burn thin branches and debris that burned quickly, requiring her to wake every hour to feed the stove. Every time she opened the furnace door was a small betrayal, allowing Siberian cold to suck the heat from the room. They knew. The wolves seemed to possess an instinctive understanding of her weakness. 2 hours earlier, while she was checking the small attached shed that served as storage and a natural cold chamber, she heard the unmistakable sound. Not a howl, but the sharp, dry bark wolves use for tactical communication. They had discovered the cabin's weakest point, the back door, old and warped by moisture and ice. The tension was built on a promise. Why didn't Yelena, physically frail, surrender, seeking the mercy of a quick death by cold, or at least attempt the insane 400-kilometer walk to civilization? The answer was hidden beneath a loose floor panel near the stove, a rusted iron box, heavy, one Boris had made her swear to protect with her life. No matter what happens, Luby Maya, don't let them take the contents. What was in the contents? It wasn't gold. Metals freeze fast. It wasn't food. Food rots. It was something Boris considered more valuable than their own lives. And the wolves' obsession with the cabin seemed, somehow inexplicably, connected to it. It wasn't just flesh they sensed. There was a faint smell, metallic, almost sulfurous, that the wind occasionally carried. driving the pack into greater frenzy. The night unfolded as a slow, relentless escalation of claustrophobia. Yelena moved through the cabin like a shadow, every motion meticulously calculated to conserve energy. Her boots, made of elk hide and stuffed with dry moss, made almost no sound on the plank floor. The only light came from the glowing mouth of the stove, and a kerosene lantern kept at its lowest setting. She approached the window, a triple-pane glass shielded inside by heavy bear pelts. She pulled one edge just enough for a single aged but sharp eye to peer outside. The landscape was a terrifying steel blue, lit only by a crescent moon that looked like a blade embedded in the sky. Atmospheric ice clung to everything, shimmering with malevolent brilliance. And in the center of the clearing, where there had once been only untouched snow, there was movement. Large, lean shadows gliding with the predatory grace of ghosts. There were at least 7. The Alpha, a massive gray wolf with a dark mane, stood still, watching the cabin. He did not howl. He ruled through silence, a discipline that terrified Yelena far more than wild savagery. The others spread out, forming a semicircle around the structure. She pulled back, cold sweat trickling down her neck. Fear was a luxury she could not afford. Every minute of hesitation meant the internal temperature dropped. Yelena went to her small arsenal. The bolt-action Mosin Nagant rifle, a relic of the Soviet era, was cold but well-oiled, leaning against the wall. She checked the chamber, loading 5 brass cartridges. The smell of gunpowder, even unspent, was comforting. There was also the woodsman's axe Boris had sharpened to razor edge, which she placed near the door. The cabin was not defenseless. Boris had designed a clever external defense system. Crude traps, wire snares hidden beneath shallow snow, meant to break legs. But the extreme cold had made the metal brittle, and the wolves had learned. They skirted the trap edges, sniffing out invisible danger. Then came the interruption. It wasn't a howl. It wasn't scratching. It was a subtle, dry impact from the roof. Yelena froze, heart pounding wildly, momentarily warming her blood. The roof, logs layered with moss, was built to bear snow, not a focused attack. The wolves had discovered the snowdrifts formed a natural ramp. One of the younger wolves, most likely, had jumped. Then, silence again. They were testing defenses, searching for the crack in Yelena's armor. She looked up, knowing that if the snow gave way, the cold would flood the cabin like a tidal wave. This is the soul's re-engagement. This is not merely a story of an old woman facing nature. It is the story of human obstinacy against total annihilation. Yelena is the guardian of a legacy and a promise, and she refuses to become just another frozen skeleton in Siberia's vast white tomb. She needed more time to burn the last thick logs. But the pack was impatient. Suddenly, the massive oak door, reinforced internally with an iron bar, shuddered under a violent blow. Bam! Not a scratch. A heavy, coordinated strike from the Alpha. Yelena's body trembled. She rushed to the corner and grabbed the kerosene torch she kept ready. Kerosene was too precious to use as light, but as a weapon, it was unmatched. The air inside the cabin thickened with anticipation. The scent of burning pine mixed with the cold metallic smell seeping in from outside. Bam! Bam! The blows came faster now. They were targeting the weakest hinge, the one she'd noticed loosening weeks earlier but lacked the strength to fix. The wood began to groan in agony. Yelena knew time had run out. Surrender was unthinkable. She was not fighting over dried fish. She was fighting for Boris's secret. She knelt and, with an effort that made her joints scream, lifted the loose floor panel. The ground beneath was damp and icy, but below it lay the iron box. It was impossibly cold to the touch, as if it were draining the heat from her hand. She dragged it out, revealing the gravity of her situation. The box wasn't large, perhaps 30 by 40 centimeters, but it was incredibly heavy. Before dying, Boris had said only this: protect it until spring. Then the government will come, not before. And for God's sake, if the wolves arrive, keep them away from it. They want it as much as the cold took me. The reason the wolves were willing to risk their lives against Yelena's fortress wasn't just hunger. The metallic, sulfur-tinged odor came from the box itself, Something inside was, ironically, both an attractant and a deterrent. Crack. The hinge finally gave, not completely, but enough to widen the icy gap between door and frame. Through it, Yelena saw more than the blue glow of night. She saw eyes, yellow, piercing, feral eyes, lit by hunger and strange obsession. The Alpha tilted his head. He did not enter. He only watched, measuring distance and the final breath of human resistance. What was in the contents? And why was the government involved? Those questions hung frozen in the cabin air. But now, only one thing mattered: Yelena's imminent end. She closed the box and shoved it beneath her straw bed. The kerosene torch burned beside her. She lifted the Mosin Nagant. The metal was cold, but the wooden stock was familiar comfort. The cabin fell into total silence. Not peace, preparation. The pack was regrouping for the final strike. They knew they'd found the weak point. Yelena, the 73-year-old widow wrapped in reindeer skins, holding a rifle she could barely lift, moved toward the shattered door. She was cold, exhausted, terrified. But her determination was denser than the ice covering the taiga. Night fully arrived, and the inevitable confrontation took shape in the glow of yellow eyes in the darkness. The sound of claws scraping wood is the last sound heard before the end. Leave your comment now and tell us. Could you survive a single day at -70 degrees? Part 2 will reveal the final defense.